erase a landscape, but sometimes in its apocalyptic glow, it reveals a courage forged in flames long forgotten. Today we invite you to journey with us to discover the story of the reclusive veteran Jonas Keene and to
There's a child
uncover the
trapped in the
profound
cabin!
secret he
Get a
and his
unit
two
there now!
loyal companions have guarded for years, a secret that is now the last ember of hope for a town on the brink of annihilation. The mountain town of Whispering Pines is trapped. A crown of fire has encircled it, a relentless inferno that devours ancient pines and closes every road. But the true enemy is the silence. A thick, choking shroud of smoke has blinded the sky, and with it all modern lifelines have been severed. Cell towers have gone dark. Digital radios hiss with unintelligible static. Even the satellites, our eyes in the heavens, are blind. The town is an island in a sea of fire, completely cut off. And on that island, a group of hikers, including children, are trapped on a remote trail. With the air growing thin and their water supplies dwindling, the roar of the approaching flames is a death sentence counting down by the minute. As panic grips the valley below, the town's last improbable hope rests in a place they have long forgotten, a skeletal old fire lookout tower perched on the highest peak, a relic of a bygone era. It is the home of Jonas Keene, an eccentric veteran the townsfolk see as a ghost on the mountain, a man lost in the past. His only family are his two dogs, Atlas, a disciplined German shepherd whose gaze misses nothing, and Luna, a resilient husky built for the harshest terrains on Earth. In an age of satellites and smartphones, with a town's elite rescue team rendered helpless, why would they place the fate of their children in the hands of an old man who trusts only in the crackle of archaic war-era radios? Why is this ghost on the mountain and his two dogs their final desperate gambit? The answer, we promise you, is not found in a digital signal, but in the echoes of history. It lies buried in the scars of a forgotten war, in the quiet wisdom of a man who has seen technology fail when it mattered most, and in the unspoken language of loyalty that binds him to two companions whose courage is about to be tested by the very flames that threaten to consume them all. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because you will not want to miss a single moment of this incredible rescue. The people down in Whispering Pines think this tower is my prison. They see a skeleton of sun-bleached steel and weathered glass clinging to the mountain's peak, and they see a lonely man hiding from the world. They're wrong. This isn't a prison. It's a sanctuary. And I'm not hiding from the world. I'm listening to its soul. My world isn't measured by the neat property lines and paved streets of the valley below. It's measured in kilohertz and megahertz, in the faint, ghostly whispers that travel across oceans and continents to find their way to my antennas. The townsfolk, they scroll through their news feeds on their phones, believing they're connected. They see headlines and angry comments and think they understand the pulse of the planet. I hear it. I hear the coded weather reports from a freighter battling a typhoon in the South China Sea. I hear the cheerful, accented chatter of a ham radio operator in a small village in the Andes. I hear the rhythmic pulse of a distant beacon guiding ships through the fog off the coast of Alaska. They live in a world of curated noise. I live in the unfiltered language of the ether. This tower is my command center, and my life is governed by a discipline they would never understand. Every morning begins not with coffee, but with a systems check. I run diagnostics on the Collins, my primary shortwave transceiver, its vacuum tubes glowing with a warm amber light that feels more alive than any LED screen. I test the power output, check the standing wave ratio, and listen to the hum of the backup generator, ensuring its diesel heart is ready. It's a ritual, a prayer to the gods of analog reliability. My congregation is a unit of 3. Atlas is my shadow. He lies at the foot of my console, a magnificent German shepherd whose sable coat is the color of the forest floor at dusk. He rarely barks. He doesn't need to. His presence is a statement, calm, absolute, and unyielding. His world is this tower, and his duty is to guard it. A shift in the wind, the scent of a passing coyote, the distant rumble of a truck on the access road, nothing escapes him. I can communicate with him through a dozen silent gestures, a raised finger, a subtle turn of my head, the clenching of a fist. He understands the mission as well as I do. He is my soldier. Luna, she's something else entirely. She's the spirit of the mountain, a Siberian husky, with eyes the color of a glacial lake and an energy that seems drawn from the very rock beneath us. While Atlas is my anchor, Luna is my scout. She doesn't rest at my feet. She paces by the windows, her gaze fixed on the sprawling wilderness outside. She knows every trail, every game path, every hidden spring for miles. Her paws are tough as leather. Her endurance is legendary, and she moves through the harshest terrain with a grace that defies the chaos of nature. She isn't just a dog. She's a living compass, a force of nature in her own right. They are my family. They understand the silence and the sounds in between. They understand the language that requires no words, the deep unspoken contract that binds us. They were here for me when the ghosts came screaming back. The townsfolk don't know about the ghosts. They don't know why a decorated communications specialist would trade a world of opportunity for a life of isolation. They just see the eccentric old man on the mountain. They don't know about Kandahar. They don't know about the sandstorm. It came out of nowhere, a wall of churning brown fury that turned midday into midnight. I was 25 years old, cocky, and I believed in the infallibility of our tech. I was in charge of a state-of-the-art encrypted digital communications grid, a web of satellites and relays that was supposed to be unbreakable. It was our lifeline connecting our forward operating base to a reconnaissance team caught deep in enemy territory. Then the sand hit. It wasn't just wind. It was a physical assault of fine-grained particles that worked their way into everything: our gear, our lungs, our technology. The first sign of trouble was a flicker on my screen, a single packet of data lost. Then another. Within minutes, the entire grid began to degrade. The crystal-clear voices of my men devolved into a garbled mess of digital artifacts, like words being torn apart by a machine. I frantically tried to reroute signals, boost power, anything to hold the connection together. But you can't fight a force of nature with code. The storm was a physical entity, and it was shredding our digital signals as they traveled through the air. The final transmission I received wasn't a voice. It was a shriek, a high-pitched, agonizing squeal, as the last connection was severed, replaced by the dead, empty hiss of a failed link. Absolute silence. We were blind, deaf, and helpless. The reconnaissance team was on their own. We couldn't guide them, we couldn't warn them, we couldn't hear their calls for help. We found what was left of them 3 days later. They had walked right into an ambush they never saw coming. An ambush I was supposed to warn them about. That day I learned a lesson that was burned into my soul. The more complex and sophisticated the technology, the more spectacularly it fails. Digital is fragile. It's a 1 or a 0. It works perfectly, or it doesn't work at all. There is no in between. But analog is different. It's resilient. It can be battered by a storm filled with static, weakened by distance, but a skilled operator can still pull a voice from the noise. You can fight for a signal. You can work through the chaos. It doesn't just give up. So when I left the service, I sought refuge here in this tower, surrounded by the technology that wouldn't betray me. The townsfolk of Whispering Pines can't comprehend this. They see my tower as an eyesore, a relic of an obsolete past, standing in the way of their bright 5G future. I've seen the surveyors in their clean pickup trucks pointing up at my home. I've heard the talk on my radio scanner during their town hall meetings. An attractive nuisance, the mayor called it. A symbol of stagnation. Their grand plan is to tear down my sanctuary and erect a sleek, modern 5G cellular tower in its place. They speak of progress, of faster downloads, and crystal-clear calls. They talk about safety, believing that a stronger connection to their digital world will somehow insulate them from the raw, untamed power of the wilderness that surrounds them. They have no idea. They see this tower as a liability. I know it's a fortress. They see their proposed 5G network as an impenetrable shield. I see it as a spider's web, waiting for the first gust of wind to tear it to pieces. They see me as a crazy old man. They don't know that I am the only one who truly understands the storm that is coming. And as I watch the sky to the west turn a strange hazy orange and feel the air grow heavy with the scent of distant smoke, I know with a certainty that chills me to the bone that they are about to learn the difference between a connection that is convenient and a connection that is a lifeline. My ghosts are quiet today, but the ether is humming with a new and terrible energy. And down in the valley, the people of Whispering Pines are scrolling on their phones, utterly oblivious to the silence that is about to fall. For 2 days, the fire was a distant thought, a smudge of dirty smoke on the horizon that the people in Whispering Pines could conveniently ignore. They saw the hazy sunsets it painted, posted pictures of the blood-orange moon on their social media, and talked about the brave firefighters with a detached sort of pride. They lived under the comfortable illusion of distance, the same illusion that lets a man believe the wolf at the far edge of the meadow is no threat to his flock. I, however, have learned that distance is the most dangerous illusion of all. I tracked the fire not through the sensationalized reports on the valley's single news channel, but through the calm, professional language of the ether. My Collins hummed a faithful companion in the quiet, and through it I listened to the chatter of the U.S. Forestry Service, the scattered reports from air tanker pilots, and the coordination efforts of the CAL FIRE battalions. They spoke a language of wind speeds, humidity percentages, and fuel loads. It was a language of cold, hard facts, and the facts were telling a terrifying story. The fire wasn't just burning, it was breathing, inhaling acres of dry forest during the calm of the night and waiting for the wind. On the third morning the wind came. It wasn't a gentle breeze that rustles the pines. It was the Santa Ana, the devil wind, and it arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. The tower groaned as the first gust hit a low guttural sound from deep in its steel bones. The guy wires shrieked, singing a high tense note of protest. Luna, who had been dozing by the door, was instantly on her feet, her head cocked, her ears flattened against the rising howl. Atlas didn't move from his spot beside my chair, but I saw the muscles in his back tense. He lifted his head and met my gaze, a silent question in his intelligent amber eyes. They felt it too. The world was holding its breath. Through my binoculars I watched the distant smoke plume change. What had been a lazy vertical column began to fray, then tilt, then flatten, pushed by the relentless force of the wind. It was no longer just smoke. It was the vanguard of a fast-moving army. Down in the valley, the illusion of safety was about to be shattered. The first domino to fall was their most trusted one, the television. The local news anchor was in the middle of a segment on the upcoming Founders' Day picnic when her face pixelated froze and then vanished into a screen of digital snow. A moment of silence, then a canned emergency broadcast message. I knew what it meant. The fire had overrun the transmitter station on the lower ridge, their primary source of local information. The voice of their community had been choked out. I turned the dial on my scanner, settling on the frequency for the county's emergency services. The digital P25 system was a cacophony of frantic, overlapping calls. Fire Chief Miller was trying to coordinate a response, but his voice was strained. They were flying blind. And then the system that was supposed to make them safer began to betray them. Engine 4, what's your status? Over Miller's voice crackled, already losing its clarity. The reply was a garbled mess of robotic noise. Asterisk, Buzdar, posit, flanked by, Buzdark. Say again. 4. I can't copy. The digital signal, so clean and perfect under normal conditions, was being corrupted by the superheated ash-filled atmosphere. The ones and zeros were getting lost in the storm. I closed my eyes, and for a heart-stopping second, I wasn't in my tower. I was back in the desert, listening to the death rattle of a digital grid, the scream of dead air, where the voices of my friends used to be. A cold dread washed over me. I felt a wet nose push firmly into my hand. Atlas. He was whining softly, a low rumble of concern in his chest. I put a hand on his head, my own personal anchor in the swirling chaos of memory and reality. Then came the bigger collapse. Through the scanner, I heard a deputy shout, "Chief, the cell tower on Black Ridge is gone. We just lost the feed. It's just gone." A wave of static followed. I knew that tower. It was their crown jewel, the source of the 5G signal they were so proud of. The very tower they wanted to replicate on my mountain. In a single instant, their connection to the wider world, their internet, their social media, their ability to call for help, had been vaporized. The fragile web had been torn. Whispering Pines was now an island, but their isolation was about to become absolute. The smoke plume was no longer just a plume. It had grown into a monstrous entity, a pyrocumulonimbus cloud that was generating its own weather. Lightning flashed within the roiling black and orange mass. It was a storm made of fire, and it climbed tens of thousands of feet into the atmosphere, creating a shield of impenetrable chaos. "Command, this is Air Attack 1. A pilot's voice cut through on the CAL FIRE frequency, his tone grim. "We are totally blind up here. The smoke layer is too thick for visual, and our satellite imaging is useless. I repeat, GPS is unreliable. We have no eyes on the ground." That was it. The final failure. Their modern satellite-guided world had ceased to exist. They couldn't see the fire's edge. They couldn't track their own units. They couldn't call for air support. They were back in the Dark Ages, fighting a dragon with sticks and stones, and they didn't even know where the dragon was. While their world fell apart, mine held strong. The thrum of my diesel generator was a steady, reassuring heartbeat beneath the floorboards, powering my sanctuary. The lights didn't flicker. The call-ins didn't fail. The voices on my shortwave were crystal clear, untouched by the localized atmospheric chaos. I wasn't listening to the panic of the valley. I was listening to the calm, strategic discussions of the command center 100 miles away, who were looking at the bigger picture. I pulled out my logbook and a set of topographical maps. My movements were precise, economical, honed by years of discipline. Fire front is advancing along the eastern ridge, pushed by winds, gusting to 60 miles per hour. A voice from command reported. I drew a neat red line on my map. Air Attack reports the fire has jumped Coyote Creek, another voice added. I drew another line, watching the red circle around Whispering Pines tighten. I wasn't just surviving, I was gathering intelligence. I could see the whole battlefield, while the soldiers in the valley were lost in the fog of war. They were cut off, but I was more connected than ever. My tower, the relic they wanted to tear down, had become the only place on this mountain where the world still made sense. Atlas stood and walked to the large plate glass window, facing the valley, letting out a low, almost imperceptible growl. Luna joined him, her body rigid, her tail low. I stood behind them, looking down at the world they had built for themselves. The sun was gone, completely blotted out by the roiling smoke. The only light came from below, a hellish, pulsing orange glow that silhouetted the ridges and made the familiar landscape look alien and terrifying. Down in Whispering Pines there were no streetlights, no warm glows from houses, just a profound and absolute darkness punctuated by the angry red of the approaching apocalypse. The town was silent. All their gadgets, all their screens, all their confident connections had failed them. They were alone, trapped in the dark, with a monster at their door. And I knew, with the weight of a terrible certainty, that my long years of listening to ghosts were over. Soon they would be calling for one. The storm of fire had its own voice, a deep, ceaseless roar that vibrated through the steel legs of my tower and up into the soles of my boots. But for hours the world of men had fallen silent. The town's digital radio network, the one they believed would usher them into a new era of safety, was dead. The frequencies were an empty hiss, a testament to the fragility of their faith. I had become the sole keeper of the narrative, listening to the long-range channels, tracking the beast's methodical advance on my maps. The fire was no longer a disorganized rage. It had become a tactical entity flanking the town, cutting off its supply lines and patiently waiting to close its jaws. I was logging the fall of the western ridgeline when a ghost jumped out of my scanner speaker. It wasn't the clear, confident signal of the regional command. It was a desperate, static-choked burst from the valley. A voice I recognized. Fire Chief Miller. N1, psst, anyone on this net, do you copy? This is Whispering Pines Command. We are in the blind. Repeat, we are in the blind. His voice was a raw nerve, stripped of all authority. He was just a man shouting into a void. I fine-tuned the receiver, my fingers dancing across the knobs, chasing his signal through the atmospheric chaos. Luna whined, rising from her spot to press her head against my knee. Atlas's ears swiveled like radar dishes locked onto the speaker. Another burst came through, clearer this time. He wasn't talking to the void anymore. He was talking to his deputy. The professionalism was gone. This was personal. We found them, Tom. We found the hikers. They're pinned down in the old trapper's cabin by Eagle Falls. There was a pause, thick with a dread I could almost taste. It's Anna Henderson's group. Her boy, Ethan. God, Tom, the kid can't breathe. The name Ethan hung in the air of my tower, a sudden sharp-edged reality in a sea of abstract disaster. A child. The faceless, anonymous threat had just been given a name. My hands tightened on the edge of the console. The smoke. Miller's voice cracked. It's too thick. He has asthma. His inhaler is empty. Dr. Adams says he's in severe respiratory distress. We have maybe an hour. 2 at most. I listened frozen, as the man who ran the town's emergency services recited a litany of failure. Each sentence was another door slamming shut, another escape route consumed by the flames. Air attack is a no-go. They're grounded until this smoke clears, and it's only getting worse. We can't get a medevac chopper in here, even if we could reach them. A burst of static then. The trail from the north is gone. The fire jumped the creek an hour ago. It's a wall of flame. We can't get a team to them with the medical kit. He was listing his dead ends, one by one. I could picture him, in his makeshift command post, probably the town hall surrounded by useless technology, the maps on his walls, telling a story of a battle already lost. He was a general with no soldiers, no supply lines, and no way to reach his wounded. He was experiencing the same crushing absolute helplessness I had felt in that desert tent all those years ago. The suffocating silence of total system failure. What about the southern route? The deputy, Tom, asked, his own voice thin with desperation. It's a 5-hour hike on a good day. Miller shot back, his frustration boiling over. We don't have 5 hours. The boy doesn't have 5 hours. A long, heavy silence descended on the channel. A silence filled with the unspoken truth. They had reached the end of their knowledge, the limit of their resources. The boy Ethan was going to die in that cabin, and there was nothing they could do. I felt the ghosts of my past stir within me, whispering their cold, familiar poison. This is what happens. Connections break. People die. There is nothing you can do. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I was just an observer, a chronicler of the town's demise. It wasn't my fight. They had made their choices, put their faith in their fragile systems. They had wanted to tear down my world, to build their own. Now their world was burning. Then Miller's voice returned, but it was different. It was quiet, strained, the voice of a man talking to himself, weighing an impossible choice. There's one last chance, he murmured, barely audible through the static. A Hail Mary. It's insane, but it's all that's left. Chief Tom asked, confused. What are you talking about? There was another pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his exhausted mind, the battle between protocol and desperation. I'm going up the mountain, Miller said, his voice now firm, resolute. To the old fire tower. The deputy's reply was immediate, incredulous. That's a suicide run, Chief. The access road is a death trap. It hasn't been maintained in years. Besides, what, in God's name, is that crazy old hermit gonna do? I leaned forward, my knuckles white on the console. The entire disaster, the fire, the smoke, the trapped child, all of it had just narrowed to this single pivotal moment. Miller's response cut through the static, clear and final. It was the sound of a man who had shed all pride, all protocol, and was operating on pure gut instinct. I don't know what he can do, Tom. But his tower is still standing. He's the only person in this goddamn county who isn't flying blind right now. He's the only play we have left. I'm going. The transmission ended. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs. A man was about to risk his life to climb this mountain to come to my door, to ask for help from the ghost he and his town had tried to exorcise. The ghosts of my past screamed at me to bar the door, to let the world burn as it had let my men die. But the present was a child's name, Ethan, and the sound of a father's fear in a fire chief's voice. Grabbing my field glasses, I went to the western window. The world below was an apocalyptic painting. The fire line was a living river of molten orange, and embers the size of my fist were being carried on the wind, starting spot fires miles ahead of the main front. And there, at the base of the mountain, I saw it. A single pair of headlights, a tiny spark of defiant light, turning off the main road and onto my private, treacherous access trail. I watched as his truck fought its way up the mountain. It was a brutal, agonizing ascent. He slammed the vehicle through fallen, smoldering branches. He navigated washouts that threatened to swallow the truck whole. Embers rained down on his windshield, and plumes of thick black smoke rolled across the road, making him vanish for terrifying seconds at a time. It wasn't just a drive. It was an act of pure, desperate will. Atlas was at my side, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Luna paced behind us, her body coiled like a spring. They knew. The perimeter of our sanctuary was about to be breached. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the battered truck, its paint scorched and its windshield cracked, lurched into the clearing 50 yards from my tower. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's side door was thrown open, and a figure stumbled out into the orange-tinged twilight. It was Fire Chief Miller. He was covered in soot, his uniform torn, his face a mask of exhaustion and desperation. He stood there, swaying slightly, his gaze fixed on my tower. The man who represented the modern world, the man of order and technology, was broken. He had come to the door of the past not as a conqueror but as a supplicant. He took a step, then another, his boots crunching on the gravel. And in the heavy, roaring silence between us, I could feel the unbearable weight of the question he had come to ask. The fate of a child was hanging in that fiery air, and he had come to lay it at my feet. I opened the heavy steel door of the tower, and the heat hit us like a physical blow. It was the air of a blast furnace, thick with the taste of ash and the smell of a world on fire. Fire Chief Miller stood before me, a man stripped of his authority, his face a canvas of soot and desperation. Behind him, the forest wasn't just burning, it was exploding. The crowns of ancient sugar pines ignited like match heads, sending showers of embers cascading through the smoke-choked air. "They're trapped," he gasped, his voice raw. "A group of hikers. A kid. He can't breathe." He didn't need to say more. I had heard it all. I had lived it all. Before. "Get inside," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "Tell me everything you know. Last known position. Number of people. The boy's condition." He stumbled past me into the relative cool of the tower. Atlas stood his ground, a low growl, a constant vibrating threat in his chest. "Atlas, stand down," I commanded. The growl ceased instantly, but he remained a rigid, watchful presence between Miller and me. As Miller laid out the grim details on my topographical map, his finger tracing the path to the trapper's cabin near Eagle Falls, the ghosts of Kandahar began to whisper their familiar poisonous lullaby of failure. "You're blind. The connection is broken. You can't reach them." But this time I wasn't blind, and the connection wasn't broken. It was just physical. "The terrain between here and that cabin is a death trap," Miller said, shaking his head. "The trail is gone. It's all gullies and rockfalls, and the fire is coming up from the south. No man could make it through that alive." "No man," I agreed, turning from the map. My gaze fell upon Luna, who was staring out the window. Her body coiled, her glacial eyes reflecting the orange glow of the inferno. She wasn't watching the fire with fear. She was watching it with an intense, analytical focus, as if it were a puzzle to be solved. Beside her, Atlas sat at perfect attention, his eyes fixed on me, waiting for his orders. An idea born of desperation and a lifetime of trust crystallized in my mind. It was a crazy, impossible plan. It was the only plan we had. I walked to a heavy footlocker in the corner, the one containing my old field gear. I pulled out a rugged military-spec walkie-talkie, a simple analog device built to withstand the apocalypse, and a small, waterproof pouch. "Chief," I said, turning back to him, "your digital radios are dead. Your cell phones are useless. But this runs on a simple line-of-sight frequency. If we can get this to them, I can talk to them." Miller stared at the radio, then at me, his face a mask of confusion. "Get it to them, Jonas. I just told you it's impossible." "Not for them," I said, nodding toward my two companions. I laid out the plan, my voice steady, methodical. Every word pushed the ghosts a little further back into the shadows. I wasn't a helpless listener anymore. I was a commander. Luna, with her preternatural endurance and knowledge of this mountain, would be the pathfinder. She would navigate the treacherous, burning landscape, finding the safest route where no trail existed. Atlas, my disciplined soldier, would be the courier. He would carry the package, his focus absolute, his resolve unbreakable. I knelt, looking first at Luna. I didn't need to speak. I just pointed to the location on the map, then to the window, tracing an imaginary line through the fiery chaos. She met my gaze, a flicker of understanding in her intelligent eyes. She let out a single, sharp yip. She understood the mission. Then I turned to Atlas. I strapped the pouch containing the radio and a laminated card with simple pictographic instructions securely to his harness. "Atlas," I said, my voice low and firm, "guard this. Your life. Find them. Do not fail." He stared at me, his gaze unwavering. He licked my hand, once a solemn oath. Miller watched this exchange, his mouth agape. He was witnessing a language he didn't speak, a bond he couldn't comprehend. "You can't be serious," he whispered. "You're sending them into that. They are not just dogs, Chief." I replied, walking to the door. "They are a unit. Now get on my radio. I need you to raise your deputy. Tell him to get every soul in that town hall, to keep the main channel open. Tell them to listen." I opened the door. The heat rolled in again, but this time it was met by a force just as primal. Luna shot out into the twilight. A gray and white streak of purpose, not even hesitating, as she plunged into the smoke. Atlas was a step behind her, a dark, powerful shadow moving with a fluid grace that belied the urgency of his task. We watched them vanish into the burning forest. For the next hour, the tower was a chamber of unbearable tension. Miller, his face pale, sat huddled by the scanner, listening to the static hiss that was his town's only reply. I stood at my console, my hand on the Collins, my gaze fixed on the window. Every flare-up of the fire, every gust of wind that rattled the glass, felt like a direct attack on my soldiers. The ghosts were clawing their way back, whispering of failure, of sending my only family to their deaths. Then, through the scanner, a voice. It was Tom, the deputy. "Chief, are you there? We're here. We're listening. Is there any news?" The entire town, huddled in the dark, was waiting. It was time. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of ash and ozone. I keyed the microphone of the walkie-talkie. "This is Keene at the tower. Calling the hiking party. Do you copy? Over." Silence. Only the roar of the fire and the frantic beating of my own heart. "Hiking party, this is Keene. If you can hear me, respond. Over." The silence stretched, pulling the air from the room. Miller buried his face in his hands. The ghosts were laughing now. "You failed them just like before." And then, a sound. A faint, desperate crackle. "Hello. Hello. Is someone there?" The voice of a woman, ragged with smoke and fear. Relief washed over me so powerfully, my knees almost buckled. I gripped the console for support. "Ma'am, this is Jonas Keene. I read you. My dogs have reached you. Is the boy okay? Over." "The dogs," she sobbed. "They just appeared, like ghosts. My son, Ethan, he's breathing, but it's shallow. We don't have much time." "Understood," I said, my voice now all business. The ghosts were gone, banished by the clarity of purpose. You are not alone anymore. We are getting you out. Stay on this channel. Do not move from your location. Help is coming. I turned from the walkie-talkie to the Collins, its tubes glowing like a promise. I switched the frequency to the National Emergency Band, a channel that cut through the chaos like a blade. This was my world. This was my weapon. Mayday, mayday, mayday. I began, my voice clear and steady, broadcasting into the night. This is Civilian Relay Station, Tower Mountain call sign, Victor Lima 7, operating on behalf of Whispering Pines Emergency Command. I have a confirmed pediatric medical emergency requiring immediate aerial extraction from a hostile wildfire zone. Coordinates to follow. How copy over. Through the scanner, I could hear the collective gasp from the town hall. They were hearing this. They were hearing the ghost on the mountain speak a language of military precision they never knew existed. For a moment, there was only the hiss of the ether. Then a voice answered, faint but professional, cutting through the static from hundreds of miles away. Relay Station Victor Lima 7, this is Nightingale 15 of the 129th Rescue Wing. We read your mayday. The situation on the ground is dire, but we are a go. Send your coordinates and patient vitals. Over. The game had changed. I was no longer a recluse. I was the central nervous system of a complex rescue operation. Miller, his face a mixture of awe and disbelief, relayed the boy's vital signs, which I then transmitted to the Nightingale pilot. I used the walkie-talkie to get a precise description of the cabin's location from the hiker Anna Henderson. I cross-referenced it with my topographical maps and relayed the coordinates latitude and longitude down to the second to the helicopter. For the next hour, I was the bridge. I was the connection. I relayed medical instructions from the flight paramedic to Anna, telling her how to position her son to ease his breathing. I gave the pilot real-time updates on wind shifts and fire behavior that I could see from my vantage point. My tower, the relic they scorned, had become the most advanced command center in the region, and the whole town listened. They heard the quiet competence in my voice. They heard the respect in the pilot's replies. They heard the sobbing relief of the mother as she realized help was truly on its way. They heard the man they had dismissed as a crazy, obsolete hermit command the respect of an elite military rescue wing and bend the chaos of the fire to his will. I could feel their prejudice and fear burning away, consumed by the undeniable truth of what was happening. Finally, a new sound pierced the roar of the fire. The rhythmic, powerful whomp 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 of rotor blades slicing through the smoky air. Victor Lima 7, this is Nightingale, the pilot's voice boomed through the speaker. We have visual on the cabin. I see them. We're going in. The tide had turned. Hope, which had been a dead ember, had been fanned back into a flame. The fire still raged, but Whispering Pines was no longer an island of despair. It had a lifeline, and that lifeline was a single steady voice broadcasting from a lonely tower on a hill. A voice they had refused to hear until they had no other choice. Looking out the window at the approaching helicopter, a dark, beautiful angel of mercy descending into hell. I knew this was more than the rescue of a child. It was the rescue of a town from its own blindness. The last echo of the Nightingale helicopter's rotors faded into the smoky dawn, leaving a profound silence in its wake. From the window of my tower, I watched the town of Whispering Pines emerge from the darkness, saved not by the modern world they worshipped, but by the forgotten wisdom of a man they had cast aside. The fire still burned on the distant ridges, but its heart had been broken. A child was safe. A community was spared, and it was all thanks to the unwavering loyalty of two incredible dogs and the enduring power of an analog signal in a world of digital ghosts. The immediate danger has passed, but the story is far from over. The very people who called me a menace, the ones who planned to tear down my home for their monument to progress, are now making their way up the mountain. They come not with eviction notices, but with a debt that can never truly be repaid. What happens when a town's survival depends on the one man they tried to erase? Does gratitude erase years of fear and mistrust? And what of the ambitious 5G tower project that started this conflict? We want to know what you think. What should Jonas do? Should he accept their apologies and become the town's guardian, or retreat back into the solitude he fought so hard to maintain? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The fire was a simple enemy. It only wanted to consume. The challenges ahead are far more complicated. Jonas Keene was forced to become a hero, but the battle for the soul of Whispering Pines has just begun. If you want to discover what happens next in this incredible journey, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because the greatest storm may be the one that is yet to come.